Good day, my dear nation people. It has come to the point that we should talk about what is facing us. One politician once said, if you talk, you die. If you don't talk, you die. A voice must one day rise to say the things the way they are. Today, I'm talking about the architects of anarchy. When a sociopath writes the code of a nation, the fate becomes ours. Imagine a country, not a poor country by nature, not a country without brilliant minds, not a country without resources, but a country where everything that should work doesn't. Electricity disappears like a ghost. Fuel becomes scarce in a land full of oil. Young people study for years, yet wander the streets without jobs. The price of food rises every week, but salaries remain frozen in time. Now pause and ask yourself a disturbing question. What if this is not accidental? What if the chaos is not a mistake, but a design? What if someone wrote the code of the system this way? Or if you had to name the one law in your life right now that feels like it was written by a person without a heart, what would it be? Tell me. Tell me. And the one writing the code feels nothing. Let me talk about the hidden architects. Every system has an architect. A building has an architect. A computer program has a programmer. Every game has a designer who determines the rules. A nation is not different. Policies are written, institutions are shaped, economic structures are programmed. Someone designed the system that determines one, who suffers, who benefits, who speaks, and who stays silent. But sometimes the architect of a system is not a builder. Sometimes the architect is something else, a sociopath. Not the moving valiant with a dramatic laugh. No. A sociopath in power is far more dangerous because they look normal. They shake hands. They smile for camera. They promise change. But beneath the surface lies something chilling. A complete absence of empathy. People become numbers. Suffering becomes statistics. Pain becomes politics. And when such a mind designed the national system, the result is organized chaos. Can we talk about the birth of a broken code? It's just a part does not rule like a traditional tyrant. A tyrant rules with visible force. A sociopath rules with invisible manipulation. He understands this, he understands something very dangerous. You do not need to destroy a country with war. You simply rewrite the system. You weaken the institutions. You reward loyalty over competence. You normalize corruption. You make the abnormal feel ordinary. Slowly, the code changes. Police stop protecting people. Courts stop delivering justice. Public office stop serving the public. Is such the nature of ours? Now look at when chaos becomes policy, what happens? In a healthy society, leaders design systems that make life easier. Road improves movement. Schools build knowledge. Hospitals protect life. Institution protects justice. But in a system designed by a sociopathic mind, the logic changes. Confusion becomes a tool. Scarcity becomes leverage, and instability becomes profitable. Fresh shortage appears mysteriously again and again. Kai. Power failure becomes a permanent lifestyle. Citizens spend hours chasing basic necessity. People become too exhausted to question anything, too busy surviving to even notice the system is slowly collapsing around them. And when something fascinating happens, the same people responsible for the chaos step forward as the saviors of the chaos. They fix the problem they created, they remove the scarcity they engineered, they solve the crisis they designed, and the public applauds them, not realizing they are trapped in a loop of manipulation. Now, looking at the psychology of a sociopathic system, to understand the system, you must understand the psychology behind it. Now, a sociopath in power does not seek stability, they seek control. And chaos is the perfect environment for control. Why? Why? Because when people are stable, they ask questions. When people are educated, they challenge authority. When institutions are strong, leaders become accountable. When people are struggling just to eat, they don't protest. They don't organize. They don't resist. They just survive. And survival mode is the most powerful political weapon ever invented. And this is why you see patterns repeating year after year. Take, for example, I'm very much sure that you are aware that a nation is about to get into the season of political campaigns soon. Be ready to hear the same promises. They'll be talking about the same crisis. They'll be talking about the same suffering people are passing through, but in different speeches with the same script. Because the code was written that way. That way. The silent curse. But the real tragedy of such a system is not only economic, it is psychological. A generation slowly begins to believe something dangerous, that nothing can change. Hope becomes sarcasm. Dream becomes joke. The brightest mind, talent begins to live. And you see the brightest mind start searching for exit. The Japa syndrome. Doctors, nurses, medical practitioners begins to leave. Engineers leave the country. Scientists leave the country. And the nation slowly bleeds its future. No, not because the people lack intelligence, but because the system was never designed for progress. It was designed for permanent dependence. And the architect smiles quietly because the code is working perfectly. Do you notice that? Now, I remember one of these great musicians. He is, in fact, I look at in his music, he was giving a prophecy of what would happen and what is happening in a nation. I think that's his name is Luck Dube. In his music, he said, "You will not find justice in a world where criminals make the law." That's let that sink. Justice cannot exist when power is built on corruption. When those meant to protect the people instead protect their own interests. When criminals write the rules, truth becomes a threat. Honesty becomes a weakness. Integrity is punished instead of rewarded. In such a world, law is no longer about right or wrong. It is about control. It is about silencing the voices and writing the narratives and calling oppression harder. The guilty walk free because they design the system to serve themselves, while the innocent are crushed on the rules that were never meant to protect them. This is why so many people lose faith. Not because justice isn't important, but because they see how often it is manipulated. They watch thieves wear suits, liars hold titles, and abusers hide behind authority. They see how doing the right things costs more than doing the wrong one. And that's why hope starts to fade. But here is the truth. Even when the system is broken, morality is not. Justice may be delayed, denied, or distorted, but it's never disappeared. It lives in those who refuse to become what they are. It lives in people who speak the truth even when it is dangerous, who choose principle over profit, and who stand firm even when the odds stands against them. History proves this again and again. Every corrupt system eventually collapses under the weight of its own lies. No amount of power can permanently silence the truth. No law written by criminals can erase accountability forever. So, when you feel frustrated and angry or exhausted by the injustice you see, you are not weak. You are awake. Don't let the corrupt world corrupt your character. Be the proof that justice exists, even if the law has forgotten its purpose, because when criminals make the law, justice does not die. It waits for the brave people to defend it. That's Luck Dube. Now, uh, let's see the silent collapse. Here is the tragedy. Nations really collapse in one dramatic moment. They collapse in slow motion. Schools decay, hospitals weakens, young people lose hope. Talented citizens leave the country in search of dignity elsewhere. The streets remain busy, markets still open, people still laugh. But underneath, a silent collapse is happening. And the architects of the system watches it unfold like an experiment. What becomes the most dangerous outcome of all this? The greatest victory of the architects of anarchy is not words. I repeat, The greatest victory of the architects of anarchy is not wealth. It is not power. It is not control. It is when citizens normalize dysfunction, when corruption becomes expected, when injustice becomes tolerated, when survival replaces hope. And that moment, the system no longer needs suppression because the people have become unconsciously accepted the code without knowing. Without knowing. How does this writing the code works? But history also teaches something powerful. No act of anarchy lasts forever. No, not even one. Because every broken system eventually meets a generation that revises the code. Talking about writing the code. There will be a time a generation may begin to ask difficult questions. A generation that refuses silence. A generation that understands something important. That a nation is not its ruler. And when the people decide to rewrite the code, history also teaches something powerful. No architect of anarchy lasts forever. Not even one. Even when it seems they don't last forever. Because every broken system eventually meets a generation that refuses the code. Yes. It's like pushing the people to the wall. They will say, enough is enough. Every time a generation will begin to ask difficult questions. A generation that refuses silence. A generation that understands something important. That a nation is not its ruler. Rather, a nation is its people. And when the people decide to rewrite the code, even the most careful design system of chaos begins to collapse. This is what I suggest and I want us to reflect on. The real question is not, why is everything broken? The deeper question is, who wrote the system this way? Because until a society identifies the architect of its chaos, it will continue living inside the architecture of that chaos. A nation does not collapse overnight. It collapses slowly through system design without empathy. And when a sociopath writes the code of a nation, the tragedy is this. The fate of millions becomes the consequences of one mind without conscience. The fate of millions and millions of people becomes the consequences of one mind without conscience. But history also shows something powerful. Code can be written. Architectures can be redesigned. And when people finally understand the system they are inside, they begin to imagine something dangerous to the architect of anarchy, a different future. So let me ask us, if the system is coded to keep people powerless, who will be brave enough to rewrite the code? Food for thoughts for the citizen of the nation.